In this video, we're going to show you how to install the gas tank on your Subaru Legacy located underneath your vehicle. Before tackling this job, make sure that you're working in a well-ventilated area, as we're going to be opening up the fuel tank and you will be susceptible to fuel vapors. Now with the hood open, you want to go ahead and locate the fuse box here on the driver's side portion of the fender. We're going to go ahead and open this up. It's going to be two tabs, one on the front, one on the side, pinch and pull. And then you're going to flip this over. Now you can go ahead and look at this here, and you want to go ahead and locate the fuel pump fuse, which is this one here on the lower portion. If you look at this box right here, it's going to be the 15 amp fuse right on the end. I'm going to use a pair of needle nose pliers to gently pinch and pull. And then we're going to set that aside. Now you want to hop into the vehicle. You want to go ahead and crank that engine up. You want to start it. If the engine starts, it's going to die fairly quickly because there's no fuel being pushed into the engine. But doing this actually purges the fuel, so it removes that high pressure from the fuel lines. And then we go ahead and open up that fuel pump. After we started the engine, we let it run for a second and it died out. I'm going to go ahead and install our fuse, push that back into place, and install that cover. Our next step, go ahead and disconnect the ground terminal from our battery. Locate the battery on the driver's side of the engine compartment. We're going to use a 10mm socket to loosen the cable on the ground terminal. Okay, give that a little wiggle, twist it up, and set it aside. Now in the back seat of the vehicle, we want to go ahead and remove the lower portion. Now right about here, where the seat cushion comes over and meets the other one, you're going to come over about 2 inches and then follow down. You're going to put your hand at the base of the seat. You're going to feel a little tab, and you want to go ahead and just pull upward. And you can do this on the passenger side as well. Go ahead and pull out that lower seat cushion and set it aside. Now with the back seat out, I want to go ahead and remove this cover here. It's going to be 4 Phillips head screws. Go ahead and grab your Phillips head screwdriver, loosen and remove these. I'm going to grab the edge here and pop this cover up and off. Now there is a rubber grommet here. What I normally like to do is just kind of push in and roll the edges in. And just pop that right through. Go ahead and slide this cover back. Then on the top here, there's an electrical connector. You can push down on the little tab here and pull that connector off. Next, we want to go ahead and disconnect our lines here. Now, before we do that, I would recommend that you grab some rags here, because there will be some residual fuel left in these lines, so you want to try and capture some of that. Now, here's a little tech tip. Before you remove the fuel lines here, go ahead and grab an old pair of gloves, cut the fingers off, and this is going to make great little pockets here. You can go ahead and pull them over, use some wire ties, and tie it, and that's going to keep the vapors down to a minimum. Now the locks here, you're going to pinch the little tabs here, and you're going to pull the hose off. Now you can use a pair of hose pliers here, and you can see if I pinch this here, you can see those tabs moving. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put my rag over this to capture any fuel that might come out, or at least most of the fuel. You can see that the hose is pulling off of the little plastic lock tab there, or locking clip. Always make sure you're wearing safety glasses when performing a job like this. And pull that off. Go ahead and grab one of those little finger socks here, or whatever you want to call them, a little finger sleeve, or slide that over. And if you even want to, go ahead and snip off the excess. Keep it nice and clean, easy to work with. We're going to repeat this process for this one right here. See, we got a little bit of fuel still in there, which is typical. We're all set here. We're going to wait to remove these nuts to separate this unit from the tank once we drop the tank out. We now want to go ahead and repeat this process underneath the rear passenger side of the tank. Go ahead and pull the cover off. Right here, there's a gray connector. You're gonna push in on the side tab right here and pull this connector off. Here it is, just one large square connector. Two lines here, gonna do just like we did on the other side. Now this line here is a little bit tougher to get to disconnect because one of the tabs is right up against that bracket there. I'm just using a pocket screwdriver to get to one side. I'm trying to push in on the other side. There it is. If you want to, you can go ahead and take some spray solvent and just kind of clean up some of that fuel around there.
Now, underneath the rear of the vehicle, you're going to locate the two mufflers. There's one on the passenger side and one on the driver's side. And both of these have two hangers. There's going to be one here with the hook facing forward and the one over here, rubber hanger with the hook facing rearward. I'm going to go ahead and separate this rubber hanger from this hook first. Sometimes spraying the rubber down with some spray solvent is going to help us to pop that off. Now, if you use some sort of lubricant, that's great, but it does make the rubber super slippery and can make it a little challenging to work with once it starts wobbling around. It doesn't matter which end you pop off, so whichever one is easier for you to go ahead and tackle, go ahead and do so. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and repeat this process for the driver's side. Next, we have the two inboard hangers right here. We're going to go back to the passenger side rear. It doesn't matter which one you do, but go ahead and spray that down. And we're going to try and pull this off of the actual stud itself and not the hanger. There it is. Now at this point here, we do have the one on the driver's side we need to do, but next we want to go ahead and use our pole jack to support the rear of the exhaust system. Now with our pole jack here, we're going to go ahead and support the exhaust just in front of the Y. Now just before our pole jack here, we have a centered hanger right here, rubber hanger. I'm going to go ahead and spray that. Once again, doesn't matter which one you take off. Here we go. Now right about mid portion of the vehicle, you're going to locate the flange here where the back portion of the exhaust meets the front portion. Now we're going to use our 13 millimeter gear wrench on the nut here and our 13 millimeter on the bolt side on our ratchet. Now yours might vary depending if the exhaust has ever been touched before. Sometimes these bolts will break, so you just gotta kind of be prepared. We did spray it down with some rust penetrant. Let's go ahead and remove the bolt and hardware here. Now at this point here, once we remove the hardware, once we bump this exhaust, it's gonna drop, as well as the back section of the exhaust. You wanna be prepared, have someone else there to help you out if needed, but be careful, you don't want this whole exhaust system to drop and hit the ground. Now at this point here, I wanna go ahead and give our exhaust a couple quick bonks. And looks like we're separated there. So we have some assistance. We're gonna go ahead and pull the exhaust system down. All right, we'll set this down. Now in the center of the vehicle, we have our heat shield here. You need to go ahead and remove that. There's 4 12 millimeter bolts holding it in place. Let's go ahead and loosen and remove the hardware for this. There's one right on the other side. And probably get those to the point where you could just kind of grab those bolts and spin them out. Now just beyond here, we're going to have 2 on the back section. Good, work the heat shield out. Now here we have our rear drive shaft coming through, and what I want to do is I'm going to use a crayon to mark the flange to the rear here. So when we install this here later on, we line everything up as it was. So I'm just going to put a line here on the flange and right here. Now we're going to be using our 12 millimeter wrench here, and to keep the drive shaft from rotating, I'm just going to use a pry bar and go right up inside the yoke here. Now I'm just going to spin that out. I'm not going to remove it. Now instead of a pry bar here, you can use a screwdriver if you want. Something to just kind of lock that. And we did spray these down with some rust penetrant to try and help us out. I'm going to remove all but one of these nuts with washers. This one here I'm going to keep out near the end. Now, I just want to make sure that you have a catch can underneath the tail portion of the transmission where the drive shaft goes into. Once we go ahead and remove this here, transmission fluid will leak out and it's going to drip. So have that bucket ready to go. Now, in the center of the vehicle, we have our front drive shaft and rear with our carrier bearing. There's two 14mm bolts holding this up in place. We're going to go ahead and use our 1/2-inch drive, and we just want to go ahead and break this free. With both of those broken free, I'm going to switch over to my ratchet, and hopefully we can go ahead and zip those out. All right, now at this point here, we're going to put the bolt back up just a couple threads, just enough to hold us in place. So let's now go ahead and remove, or at least loosen the other side. Get that loose. The other one's hanging in there. I'm just going to put a little bit of rust penetrant on that bolt and throw that in just a couple threads. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and remove the last nut on the back here with that washer. Set that aside. Now supporting pretty much the rear section here, pushing up here. Let's go ahead and remove these two bolts. All right. Lower this down and go ahead and pop that flange out of the back with these bolts. And let's go ahead and slowly pull that drive shaft out. And there's our transmission fluid. And go ahead and set that drive shaft off to the side. Now here underneath the gas tank is going to be two splash shields, one on the driver's side here and one on the passenger side. There's going to be 5 pieces anchoring these here. There's going to be 3 bolts, 2 nuts. There's 2 over here on the outer driver's side portion. There's 1 here, and that's a bolt. So we're going to use our 12mm socket, our extension, and our ratchet. And we're going to loosen and remove these. Now, once you get all these loose, you want to take note that there's probably some debris and stuff on top of that splash shield. So wear safety glasses if you're pulling this down on top of you. Now, we did spray these down with some rust penetrant, and these are pretty rusty. Hopefully your 12mm will be working on this here, but ours are rounding off. So at this point, you want to go ahead and loosen and remove these nuts. All right, we're going to go ahead and repeat for the back one. Now you're going to need an extension to get up to this one here. Here it is. Now we can go ahead and take the splash shield here, lower it down and remove it. So now we have that splash shield out. You want to go ahead and repeat this for the passenger side. Want to remove this heat shield for the exhaust. It's actually bolted to the gas tank straps on the back section. There's 2 12mm nuts. We want to go ahead and loosen and remove these. Now, sometimes if you start to feel that nut stiffen up a little bit, kind of move it back and forth. And don't forget, you can use some rust penetrant on these as well. Let's move to the front and get that one bolt out. Now here's a 12 mil bolt right here, right up in the drive shaft tunnel. All right. Go ahead and shake that off. We've got to remove that, set it aside. Let's go ahead and disconnect our lower bolt here to our strut. Do a 19 millimeter on the bolt. Now the bolt has a 19 millimeter nut on the other side. I'm going to use my wrench to hold that. Going to remove that nut. Now there's a little bit of tension here on the strut here with this bolt. I'm going to go ahead and use a punch on the other side and try and tap that bolt out. There we go. Let's go ahead and repeat this for the other side. Now after we've gotten the bolt out from the strut here, we're going to come up here to the inside of the forward arm, and there's a 12 millimeter bolt here on a bracket, and that holds our brake line as well as our ABS wire. We're going to use our socket, our extension, and our ratchet to go ahead and get in there, loosen and remove that bolt. All right, go ahead and wiggle that stuff free. Now there is a hard line here, so this isn't going to be too flexible at all, but we do want to separate it from that rear end. Once you get this out, go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. Now in front of our gas tank here, we have a parking brake cable that runs across the front and it's held in place by this bracket right here, 12 millimeter bolt, and a little bit further over is another 12 millimeter bolt that goes up into the body itself. Now you want to go ahead and spray this down with some rust penetrant if you're in the rusty area like we are, and squeeze that 12 mil socket on there. And you want to try and remove this. And if you follow the line over, there's one right up here. There it is. Now we have this bracket right here. It's placed between the floor and the gas tank. 12 millimeter bolt. Loosen and remove this bolt. Now you want to go ahead and repeat this whole process for the passenger side. Now right here we have our ABS wire that goes into a little bracket. Go ahead and pull that out. Make sure you're not pulling on the wire itself, but just use I'm using a trim tool to try and just get a hold of that rubber grommet and pop that out. Now right here is where it's connected. You can do one of two things. Separate this wire from the harness itself. I don't like to tamper with things like that if you don't have to. So I'm going to go ahead and use a pair of needle nose pliers, come up behind this here, this little plastic retainer, pinch the tabs, and just take the whole harness right off. There it is, just like that. Now there's the little tab. You just pinch the little tabs right here that retain it, and then just pull it through. It's going to give us a little more flexibility. Now you want to go ahead and repeat this for the passenger side. Now we have our jack set up underneath here, and we have our pads set up on our control arms here. And on the inboard portion, we have some pads here that are going to go up on the subframe. Now before we start to loosen our bolts, we want to go ahead and prep this, get everything lined up, and just apply some slight upward pressure to hold the cradle in place. Now, if you're doing this at home and you don't have a transmission jack or a jack like this here, you can only go ahead and put it underneath the rear differential and hold that. It's going to be a little more complicated because the rear end's going to want to wobble around. Something like this is going to be ideal to keep the stability. We're going to go ahead and use our securing strap here for safety purposes here to keep this anchored. Doesn't have to be super tight, just want to make sure that that whole rear suspension is secure and it's not going to come tumbling off when we start to move this here. Now in the front portion of the vehicle here, we're going to use our pole jack to gently go ahead and not going to raise the vehicle, we just want to support it. So once that jack makes contact, we're just going to put it there so it doesn't move. Now if you're on the ground and you're jacking up the back of the vehicle, go ahead and do this job. You probably won't need this here, but if you have the vehicle lifted up off the ground, because of the amount of weight we're separating from the back of the vehicle, you want to go ahead and support the front. You don't want the front to pull off. Now on the front portion of our suspension here, there's going to be 3 bolts, 19mm bolts. There's one right here, there's one right beside it, so there's 2 of them side by side, and there's one further back. We're going to use our impact gun here. Now it's best if you keep track of what bolt comes out of where. Those 2 bolts are identical. Let's go ahead and get that rear bolt. So all 3 of these bolts are identical. Let's go ahead and do the same for the passenger side. Now the back portion of the subframe is going to be a bolt right here, 19mm, loosen and remove. You can see the subframe start to drop. You definitely want to go ahead and repeat this process for the passenger side. Now we left our middle bolts for last. This is on the driver's side. Remove that bolt. Now we're going to do the same for the passenger side. When you do this here, be careful. You can see that that cradle had dropped down a little bit. Let's get to the passenger side bolt here. Now before we lower down the rear end here, you want to pay attention. This is the only thing. Right here is our hard line where it meets to the flex hose. We have a minimal amount of mobility here. Now, what you may end up doing is disconnecting the hard line from the flex hose here if you do not get enough of droop from the rear end to get the gas tank out. We're gonna go ahead and slowly start to lower this down. Right about there should be good. We have the same amount of flex on both sides, which is perfect. On the back side of the tank here, we have our fuel filler neck right here. This is a rubber flexible hose, and you want to go ahead and separate the hose from the metal tube there, from the filler tube. So we're going to use our 10mm socket, 1/4 inch drive on our 1/4 inch ratchet. Now what we're experiencing here, it appears that the screw for our hose clamp is coming undone, but yet the hose clamp is not shifting there. Here we go. It's actually starting to move for us, so that's good. Sometimes these clamps will break, so you want to be prepared to source out some replacement components here. We just want to make sure that's loose enough. You can slip that off. Bring that back this way. Now, if you can, I'm going to try and put some pliers on this here just to try and break this rubber free from that steel tube. It's been on there for a lot of years, so it's going to take a little bit of work to get that separated. Now you want to be careful not to damage that flex tube. Here we go. We get some movement there, so that's good. Now you don't have to separate this yet. We just want to break that seal free. We can go ahead and pull that off once we start to lower the tank down. We have a little bit better access to it. Now these hoses right here has some rusty pinch clamps on there. I want to go ahead and pinch those clamps and pull those back. These are pretty rusty. We might end up replacing these with some worm clamps or something later on. We use our hose pliers here. Now there's a possibility some of these lines here may need to be replaced depending on how hard and brittle they are. Now what I'm going to do here, so that I know which hose goes to this lower line, I'm going to go ahead and use a crayon and mark these. I'm going to do the same for this one here, work this one off. So if you have plans on replacing these lines, you can simply just use a razor blade and cut that and just replace them afterwards. Now around the perimeter of the tank, there's going to be a series of these little plastic buttons here. They usually hold in a wiring harness or something like that. We want to go ahead and go around the perimeter and pop these off. You can use some pliers. Just pinch the little retainers here and push those up and through. Now keep in mind, because of the age of the vehicle, some of these buttons might break. Not critical, you can just use a wire tie later on to secure those or obtain some new buttons. Now these two hoses are the ones we just disconnected. Now if you go upward right here, there's another line we need to disconnect. Now there's going to be a blue safety lock on it. There's two little pinch tabs on either side. Normally you can just reach up, pinch those two tabs inward towards each other and pop this off. There we go. There it is. If you can't use your hand, you can use a pair of hose pliers to gently squeeze the blue tabs together and then work that off. Now I want to go ahead and remove the nut here and the nut up top here to remove this bracket. Using our 10mm socket and extension. And you can see on our particular vehicle, rust has gotten the better of us. So we will have to source out a replacement bracket or repair this one. Now on the driver's side back corner of the tank, we have some emissions related components here. There is a 10mm nut right here, holding that in place on this little bracket. I need to go ahead and loosen and remove this. And we should be able to work that free. There it is. Following that, we have our plastic shield right here. There's a little, well, it's a button right here. Our button already popped out. When you push this plastic button out, we should be able to go ahead and grab this shield. I'm going to want to peel this back. On the other side of this has this hose right here that attaches to the side of the fuel tank, so we need to go ahead and access that. Now this hose here attaches to the tank via clamp, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach up, and there's tabs on this clamp
If you can rotate that over, you can probably see those tabs right there. And we're gonna use a pair of pliers to pinch those tabs and pull that hose clamp back.
The trick here is getting a pair of pliers to fit up in there. That seems like it's working good. Okay, the next step is to try and get that hose pulled off. You try a pair of hose pliers. The trick here is to kind of grab that so you can break the seal free. Now that we've broken the seal free on this hose, we're gonna go ahead and remove the gas tank straps and start to lower the tank. That'll give us better access to that hose, and we should be able to pop that off as we lower the tank. Our next step is to go ahead and loosen and remove our gas tank straps. However, you wanna pay attention to this here. We're not gonna put our gas tank jack underneath here yet. We're gonna start by breaking the bolts free for our straps. Using our 12mm socket with extension and a ratchet. Follow the strap up to the front side here. All right, repeat for the passenger side strap. I'm gonna go ahead and get our gas tank jack in place here. Just apply light upward pressure. Now, if you're using a floor jack on something like this here, you probably have a 2x4 or 2x6 running across with your jack underneath it to go ahead and support the tank before you undo the straps completely. Now, you probably noticed that we're using hand ratchets for everything because we have open fuel vapors running around here, or have an open tank with the fuel vapors. We don't want to run anything that's going to create a spark, which our impact driver would do that. Now, the rear bolt is a lot longer than the front. Just take note of that when we go to reinstall. And then we're going to go ahead and repeat this process for the passenger side. Let's go ahead and remove the straps. Now, at this point here, we're going to slowly lower the tank. Now, remember, we have that hose still attached on the driver's side, side portion of the tank, so you don't want to drop it too far. With the tank lowered down a little bit, I'm going to go around the perimeter of the tank and double check any hoses or electrical connectors that need to be disconnected before we keep going any further. And go ahead and grab this and use the edge of the tank there to go ahead and work that off. Now, at this point here, we want to go ahead and lower our tank down. We have everything else disconnected around the perimeter. Now, we have our parking brake cables. We want to try and get up over the front leading edge of our tank. Now, we do have assistance to help us with this here because we need to tip the tank forward and then pull the back end out over that rear cradle. All right, so we have that stuff out of the way, and we're going to slowly start to lower the jack. Now, as we're lowering down the front of the tank here, we have the wire harness on the driver's side coming down, and it goes into this retainer right here. Now, what we want to do is simply use your pocket screwdriver and go ahead and open that up. Now, up here, and go ahead and grab that fuel filler neck. And pop that off like so. All right, let's go ahead and wiggle this out. There it is. All right, we're going to slowly continue to lower the tank and slide it forward as it's coming down. And I'll go ahead and safely lower this down. And then once it's down far enough, we're going to go ahead and set it on the ground.
Now at this point here, we have our tank on a cart, and we want to go ahead and start to disassemble our old tank and swapping components over. Now right here where these two lines are, there's two plastic retainers, and we're going to use a pocket screwdriver to go ahead and disconnect these two from the tank. Now on this side here, you're only going to find two tabs, one here and one here, and you can only access it from this side, not the other side. And what you're going to do is go in there, grab that tab, and gently pull up while you're prying out. And then do the same on the front one here. And there it is. There's just two little tabs that lock into these two holes. I'm going to repeat this process for the one beside it. And once you release those there, set those aside. And take your clips. Just want to line these up and snap those into position. I'm going to remove our hardware, holding our sender in place, using our 8mm socket and our 1/4" ratchet. Now when you pull the unit out, you want to make sure that you index this here so that you know when it goes into the new tank what direction it goes in. So I'm simply going to put a mark here with my crayon. This side here is going to face the fuel pump sender on the other side of the tank when we reinstall the whole unit. And we're going to do the same thing on our fuel pump sender unit here. Index it so you know which way the pump itself is installed. Now the electrical connector is facing the back of the tank. So if you want to, you can mark the lock ring and the area there. Really doesn't matter how you do it, it's just a little tip. Our fuel tubes are going to have to be in the correct location anyways. Now we're using an 8mm socket as well as our 1/4" ratchet, same as the other side. Now when you're doing this here, you want to be prepared. Nothing crazy, but our fuel pump sender unit might be spring loaded. So it might have a little bit of upward pressure. So if you push down on this, you can actually see that it's pushing upward. So go ahead and put a little bit of downward pressure on there. Then we can release this. Now our lock ring itself is keyed just like the other side. And I'll show you this. Separate it from that gasket. There's a little notch right here. And that notch lines up with a little tab on the fuel pump unit itself. Just gotta lift this up and out. And now be prepared, there may be some fuel inside the unit itself. You want to position it so that you don't damage the float. So you can see the metal arm on the side of it. You're gonna tip this. And then work this up and out like so. And then let's go ahead and get that ready to go into the new tank. Now I want to go ahead and separate our little ports here, or vent tubes, and then we have our filler neck tube. We need to loosen up the hose clamp and pull this off. Now it's going to be critical on the direction here. Now if you happen to notice on ours, there's white marks on the top, and I'm pretty sure that's going to indicate that the hose itself, that part is at the top facing upward, because it's going to be important for our angle here. I'm going to go ahead and remark this here with my crayon. Use your pliers, pinch and slide that down, and do this on both of them while we're here. Gently grab and twist to break that free. Same thing here. And see if we can twist these off. You can see the rust just crumbling off around. Might be worthwhile replacing these hoses if they are as rusty as these are here. The rubber itself might be dry rotted and you may want to replace those at that time. Now our hose clamp is so rusted, there's nothing left on the top for me to even use a screwdriver on. So at this point here, you're probably going to use an 8mm to go ahead, loosen and remove your hose clamp, or a flathead screwdriver. Ours, we're going to have to find another way to go ahead and release this clamp. I'm marking the top of my hose here. Now with the new tank, you may have these little rubber protectors on these studs. Be sure to remove those. I install our gasket here. And take our sender, feed that in. Now we're going to take the new lock ring here. You can use a Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver to loosen and remove the screws. I want to take our new gasket. Has a little notch in it here to line up. Work this gasket into place. Install the lock ring. Line up this little notch here with the sender. There it is. You can see I'm lining this up to go with that. Now we do need to make sure that our sender fits into this gasket here. So it might take a little bit of work. You can either do this here or try and work the gasket onto the sender first, whatever works for you. Okay, now that we have this in place, I'm gonna go ahead and get our nuts started here. All new hardware is supplied. Let's go ahead and snug these down. Now when doing this here, I like to do a cross pattern. I'll snug that down gently. I'll do the same thing over here. I'm going to go back to the first one. And I want to make sure that it's snug. Just bottom it out, give it a little bit more. Do the same here. And we'll go ahead and snug these. There we go. Once it's bottomed out, just give it a little bit more. Let's go ahead and repeat this process for the fuel pump unit. Now you want to go ahead and swap over the old gasket. Now I'm going to take note that there is a little rubber locking point here right near or diagonal from our electrical connector. And there's two more up on the top. In some cases you may have to undo the float in order to swap this over. So you want to be aware and cautious of that. Let's lower the sending unit down in, spin this, and drop this down into position. Go ahead and line that up. Here we go. We do want to make sure that our gaskets are seated fully. Get all these nuts started. And we're going to do the same thing as we did on the other side. Snug them all down, and then we'll snug them or tighten them down in a crisscross pattern. So we do want to make sure that the rubber points come through our lock ring. Now, as they come through, you can grab these with pliers and gently pull them up. You're going to hear that lock ring actually lock in that rubber gasket there. And let's go ahead and snug these down. At this point here, once you've bottomed them all out, just go around and just snug them gently. Now that we have everything swapped over, we can go ahead and install these connectors. The little glove pieces here serve their purpose, keeping vapors at bay as well as protecting the units, keeping debris from getting inside there. Be sure to line up the tabs that line up with the notches or the holes on each side of the port. Push it on, lock it in. I'm going to do the same here. Good, and give them a little tug, make sure they're locked in. Let's go ahead and do this one on this side here. We're going to install our hose here, lining up our yellow, keeping that on top. And when sliding these on, sometimes you can give this a quick spray with some spray solvent. slip on a lot easier. Make sure that is seated up against the tank. Tighten down your clamp. Okay, make sure that's good and secure. Now you definitely want to go ahead and check the hoses. We found that ours, we had a cracked hose here. Once again, probably adding to our codes for our fuel vapor leak. So you need to go ahead and replace this hose here. Go ahead and install the hose here. Slide our clamp over. Now at this point here, what we want to do is we want to remove our gloves here. Our gloves serve the purpose as far as keeping debris out of these lines. Now at this point here, we're going to go ahead and lift up our tank and slide it up and over that cradle. Then we're going to use our jack here to get underneath, and we're going to pump that up to give us some assistance in holding that. And that's good right there. Now on the upper back portion here, we have this bracket right here, and we have that vapor line. We need to go ahead and install that onto the back of the tank. So we're going to go ahead and wiggle that on. You're just going to finagle the stuff around here. Now at this point here, we have that vacuum hose on there. We want to go ahead and bring that little clamp over. Here it is. Bring our bracket over here. Go ahead and try and get that nut on this bracket. Not going to tighten it, just want to try and get in a position that's going to make it a little bit easier for us later on. Now at this point here, we're going to go ahead and slightly raise up our tank, tipping it backward and getting it closer up and over that cradle. Before we start to install any straps, I do want to go ahead and on the back side, start to reconnect some of those hoses. Install this upper hose here. Now normally you would just use your pliers to go ahead and move that clamp over. We had to replace our line because it was bad, as well as our clamp. When installing clamps, you want to make sure that the clamp itself is not going to come in contact with other rubber hoses as a safety precaution. Now remember earlier we had marked our hose here, a yellow mark on the hose and a yellow mark on the line, on the hard line. Here's a little tip. Give that hose a little quick spray with some spray solvent and it may make it easier to slide on.
Go ahead and slide your clamp into position. Let's go ahead and get our flex port installed here. Now we'll go ahead and work this on further once we get the tank further up in a position, but at least it's on. Let's go ahead and raise our tank up and tuck it further back. On the driver's side, we need to go ahead and install this tube here, this hose. All right, now that we have that in place, don't forget to move your clamp. I'm going to go ahead and tighten this down here. I want to make sure that's good and snug. Now some of these retainer buttons here, we'll go ahead and line these up and start to pop these into place. Now for any reason, if your little buttons here don't line up, you can always anchor those with a wire tie of some sort. Now what we're going to do is you're going to follow along the harness or along the tank, install the rest of the plastic push pins and any of the retainers to anchor that harness down. On the front portion of the tank here, you're going to grab that wire harness. Now this is the harness that runs from the fuel pump and sender to the sender. We have to install this into that plastic retainer here. Line that up. Before you snap this down, you want to get it on the other side as well. And then press these down, securing that in place. Let's go ahead and install our bolt here for the front strap. Now we're not going to tighten it down. We're just going to run it up a little bit. We do want to make sure that there's some flexibility on that strap. There we go. Now let's go ahead and move to the back side and install that bolt. Now at this point here, we have both straps installed. We can go ahead and tighten everything down. Once that bottom's out, just give it a little bit more. Make sure it's good and tight. And do the same for the front. Let's go ahead and repeat for the other three. I'm going to go ahead and install this little bracket here. Go ahead and get that bolt started. I'm going to go ahead and snug that down. Go ahead and install the one on the passenger side. Install the parking brake cable here. Once you get that bolt started, I'm going to follow the cable up and get the bolt started on the other end for this other bracket. Once you get them both started, we're going to snug them down. Repeat for the other side. All right, now we have our bracket lined up here. Let's go ahead and get our bolt started. And we'll go ahead and snug that down. Just using our 10 mil socket and our 1/4 inch ratchet. Then we have our plastic shield right here. Should be a plastic push button that goes in there. Let's go ahead and get that installed. We'll install the plastic push pin here. Let's go ahead and remove our fuel tank jack. Here we go. We got our filler neck on all the way. Let's go ahead and tighten down the hose clamp. Now this is one of those points here you want to inspect that hose clamp. If it looks like it's rusted and falling apart, replace it now while you're here. You have easy access to it. If it's in good shape, go ahead and snug it down. Our next step is to go ahead and raise up our rear suspension cradle. Now as we do this here, you want to pay attention. You want to watch the rear struts. Make sure they're not getting caught on anything, as well as our brake lines and our ABS wire here. So let's go ahead and jack this up in a position. Now we're just going to go ahead and manipulate this on our jack. Get that bolt started. I'm just going to run it up a few threads. I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the other side. And on the back side here, I'm going to install these bolts. Don't forget to install the big metal washer. Now this should be pretty darn close to being lined up once you get the middle ones in. That's why we install the middle ones first. Get those bolts started, and then we'll go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. Let's go ahead and install the 3 bolts on the driver's side front flange bracket here. You're just gonna have to move that bracket a little bit. Here we go. Let's go ahead and get that 3rd bolt in. Get that 3rd bolt started. Now I'm not going to tighten these down. I want to go ahead and install the 3 bolts on the passenger side, and then we can go ahead to start to tighten and torque. Now what we want to do is tighten and torque these bolts here. Now what we're going to do is we're going to do everything first on the, we're going to start on the driver's side. So we're going to tighten, go to the passenger side. Then we're going to move to the front, and we're going to do those 3 up there, tighten, and then do the passenger side, and then do the 2 in the rear. And then I'll run over to the other side and take care of that one there. And repeat for the passenger side. Do the same for the other side. Then we're going to remove our securing strap. And we can go ahead and lower our jack here. With this jack removed, we can now go ahead and remove our polo jack from the front of the vehicle as well. Let's go ahead and torque down our bolts. We're starting in the center again. The center bolts get torqued to 129 foot-pounds. Repeat for the other side. Let's torque the 3 bolts on the front flange to 92 foot-pounds. Repeat for the other side. Then we're going to wrap up with the rear 2 bolts. These are 129 foot-pounds. And repeat for the other side. Let's go ahead and get our flex hose and our ABS wire installed. And the bracket itself lines up with the tab, and then just pull our ABS wire bracket down. Just kind of like wiggle these a little bit to get them to line up. I just pop my gear wrench onto that to go ahead and run those in, or run this bolt in. Once you get this one secured, we'll go ahead and finish installing the ABS wire. Okay, just snug that down. Perfect. Go ahead and get that ABS wire into that little bracket. And then press that little connector into the retainer. Oh, perfect. Let's go ahead and repeat this for the passenger side. Now what you want to do is you want to go ahead and jack up the strut and compress it up so you can get your bolt in. And once you get that bolt lined up in there, we're going to go ahead and tap that in. I'm going to install the washer on the other side, get that nut on there. And go ahead and lower our jack. I'm going to repeat for the other side. Let's go ahead and snug this down. I'm going to torque it to 46 foot-pounds. Using our 19mm wrench, holding the nut. The last of our connectors we need to connect is this one up here on the top passenger side of the tank. Line that up. All right, just push this up and you're going to feel it and hear it snap into place. Let's install our heat shield here for the exhaust. It mounts onto the two upper studs here on the gas tank strap. Now we're not going to tighten these down yet. We do want to get the stud on the forward portion of the heat shield. Let's go ahead and do that now. All right, with the bolt and the two nuts installed, we can now go ahead and snug these down. All right, let's go ahead and snug down the two nuts on the back. Just snug it down gently. I'll do the same for this one. If you line up the two studs here, go ahead and install the nuts to hold that in place. Now we did source some replacement hardware here because ours was pretty rusty. And then go ahead and snug those down. Go ahead and install your bolts. Now we're going to get all these started and we're going to come back and tighten everything down all together. All right, snug them all down. Now let's go ahead and repeat on the passenger side. Now let's go ahead and take our drive shaft. I'm going to line that up. Go ahead and push that into the transmission. And in the middle section here, we can get our bolts started on our carrier. Now we did put a little bit of EC's compound on the threads in case this ever has to come out again. All right, let's go to the back and get that flange hooked up. And we're going to get our flange lined up. Now remember when we took this apart, we had put a yellow crayon mark right on up through, so we know that everything lines up perfect. And we're going to get those 4 studs pushed through. And then we'll get our lock washers and our nuts started. All right, I'm gonna do this for all 4. Now when installing these bolts here, or these studs, you want to pay attention to these here, is that these have a flat portion on the head. So if you can't get those bolts to come through, you just need to position them properly. And then they'll fit right in. We're gonna use our 12mm. I'm gonna tighten these down. Once you get all these bottomed out, we would then want to torque them down to 23 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to use a screwdriver. You can use a pry bar right in the U-joint and hold that, keep it from rotating, and then spin this around. Now we're using a crow's foot to go ahead and torque these to fit in there. We're torqued in place. Tighten down our carrier bolts. Let's torque these down to 38 foot-pounds. Let's feed our heat shield up into position. Go ahead and get our bolt started here. And get the 2 front ones started, and then we'll install the 2 back, and then we'll snug them all down. I'm going to go ahead and raise our exhaust up into position here. Let's get a couple bolts in here. No, we're not going to tighten this down yet. We want to go ahead and swing that exhaust over to the driver's side a little bit. Get everything lined up on that flange. Now at this point, we want to go ahead and try and get the rest of the exhaust hung up on the hangers. In the midsection here, we have our rubber grommet. So we're going to use our jack to raise up our suspension and pretty much get it close to that there. Now what you might find is going to help you is taking some spray solvent. Spray that and then pull it on. That spray solvent will help that rubber, almost like a lubricant. Get that center one hung. We can lower our jack, but we're just going to keep it in place, but we're not going to use it to support the exhaust. Let's get move on to the mufflers. There we go. Let's go ahead and install the forward mount. Now I'm using a flathead screwdriver to go up into the grommet, catch the edge of that bar there, or the mount. Let's go ahead and repeat for the passenger side. And we want to go ahead and tighten these down evenly. Now our exhaust donut was in good shape, so we are reusing it. It might be worthwhile, if you are doing this, to go ahead and replace that donut. But if it's in good shape, go ahead and save you the money and reuse it.
Now back inside the vehicle, we'll go ahead and connect our fuel pump and module here. Grab that electrical connector, push that down. You're going to hear and feel it lock into place. Go ahead and grab the cover here. And go ahead and get those screws started. You want to get all four started before you snug them down. Here we go. Go ahead and gently snug these down. And then once we finish up the passenger side rear, I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the other side. Now on this side here, I want to go ahead and snip off our little protective boot. Pull off the cap. I want to go ahead and line up that notch with that little lock there. There it is. Let's go ahead and get that electrical connector lined up and popped in. You're going to hear and feel that engage. Now these covers here, the rubber grommet for the cover, I'll have to pull that through and then gently just kind of work your way around the perimeter to get that to lock into place. Let's go ahead and line up that cover and get our screws started, just like we did on the other side. Let's go ahead and gently snug these down. Now we're going to feed our back seat into position. Now on the back there's going to be a metal loop right here, and it has to hook down into the bottom. There's a metal hook down below here on the floor pan. Now as we lower this down, we also need to get our seat belts pulled up through. So let's go ahead and push the seat back, get that close to that hook, and we're going to pull our seat belts through the seat. Should get it to the point we can get the front latches in. Snap that down. Go ahead and slide that on. And go ahead and snug this down. You want to tighten this down. You want to make sure that it's good and snug, but don't over tighten it as you can break the clamp. So you're going to bottom it out. Go ahead and give that a wiggle. We're nice and solid. You're all set.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.